This is the White Coat Investor Podcast, where we help those who wear the white coat get a fair shake on Wall Street. We've been helping doctors and other high-income professionals stop doing dumb things with their money since 2011.
This is White Coat Investor Podcast number 257, PSLF, ETFs, and FSAs. This episode is brought to you by Laurel Road for Doctors. Laurel Road is committed to serving the financial needs of doctors. You take care of us, it's time someone took care of you. White Coat Investor readers and listeners receive a cash bonus when they refinance their student loans with Laurel Road. Laurel Road's easy-to-use online application process allows you to see personalized rate options in only a few minutes. Plus, we don't charge any application or origination fees or prepayment penalties. For terms and conditions, please visit www.laurelroad.com/WCI. That's www.laurelroad.com/WCI. Laurel Road is a brand of KeyBank N.A, member FDIC. All credit products are subject to credit approval. All right, let's do our quote of the day today. Should we start with that? This one comes from Mr. Money Mustache. He said, "Frugality is great. No, not just great. It's the only non-ridiculous lifestyle for the thinking person." I like that. And I like you guys. I like what you do. I appreciate what you do. I hope your patients, your clients appreciate what you do because you spent a long time learning how to do what you do. And it's hard. And there's liability. And sometimes you're working at night, evenings, weekends, holidays, whatever. I'm getting ready to go on holiday. As soon as we finish recording this, I've got a flight to Canada waiting for me. So by the time you hear this, I'll be back from my trip. I'll tell you all about it. But I'm looking forward to it. So all we got to do is answer some of your questions and I get to go on vacation. All right. What do you need to know about? Well, April 9th through 17th is the Passive Income MD Real Estate Academy. You can sign up again for that April 9th through 17th. That link will be whitecoatinvestor.com/PREA. Okay, so check that out. Remember, this is Peter Kim's, Passive Income MD's course on private real estate investing. We're talking about syndications, funds, et cetera. If you don't know how to evaluate a syndicator or a fund, the investment as well as the operator, this is the course that teaches you how to do it. You also get access to that private community there where you can work with others to vet deals and learn more about how to do that. All right. So check that out, whitecoatinvestor.com/PREA. Hey, if you haven't nominated your favorite financial educator, now these have to be practicing docs or dentists, you can also do that this month. We'll be closing up that application process by the end of the month. Every year, we award this to somebody. It's a $1,000 cash award to someone doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They can't be a blogger. They can't be a financial advisor. We're talking practicing docs, dentists who are doing this for their colleagues, for their trainees, for students. And nominate them. And we want to recognize them and we want to recognize what they're doing. We want to encourage other people to do the same thing. So if you would like to put a nomination in for that, you can do that at whitecoatinvestor.com/ what is it, Cindy? It's educator?
Sure, we'll make it.
We'll make it educator. whitecoatinvestor.com/educator will get you there. All right, let's take your questions. First one's about FSA funds.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for all that you do. I've got a question about using FSA funds to make donations of goods. If I have unused medical FSA funds and I buy a variety of products like feminine hygiene products or baby care products, and then want to donate that to a local shelter, can I write off those donations on taxes? Furthermore, if I use funds from one year, say 2021, but I don't make the donation until 2022, which year do I count the deductions for? Thank you.
All right, here's the deal. You are not supposed to be able to use an FSA for anything besides healthcare expenses that you and your family use. Okay, you're not supposed to be able to use an FSA to buy something that you then donate and take a tax deduction for. That's not the way it works. Now, is the IRS going to catch you? Probably not. They're probably not going to catch you, let's be honest. But you're breaking the rules of FSAs. That's not how they work. It's supposed to be stuff that you are going to use. Now, as far as how you take a deduction, when you donate something to charity, it's in the year you donate it is when you can take that deduction. So, I don't I don't think you should be buying stuff with your FSA that you're just planning to donate to charity. See if you can figure out a way to put less in your FSA or have your employer concentrate or compensate you in a different way. Or buy stuff that you'll actually use eventually for your health. There's lots of things you can use an FSA for. I mean, there's all kinds of eligible expenses that you can use FSA money for. The difference between a flexible spending account, of course, and an HSA, a health savings account, is the HSA you can roll money over into the next year, whereas an FSA is use it or lose it. That's the main difference. But there are all kinds of things that you can buy with an FSA that you might not have thought about. They've got extensive lists online. They've got search tools that you can use online. But let me just go through some common eligible stuff that you can use it for. Okay, acupuncture, ambulances, artificial limbs, artificial teeth, birth control treatment, blood sugar test kits for diabetics, breast pumps, lactation supplies, the chiropractor, contact lenses and solutions, crutches, dental treatments, office visits and copays, drug addiction treatment, drug prescriptions, eyeglasses, fluoride treatments, flu shots, guide dogs, hearing aids and batteries, infertility treatment, right? That's a common one for docs, inpatient alcohol treatment, vaccines, vasectomy, vision exam, walkers, canes, wheelchairs, midwives, laser eye surgery, insulin, lab fees, right? There's all kinds of stuff that you can use this for. Certain over-the-counter drugs and medications, stock up on your ibuprofen. There's lots of stuff you can buy with your FSA. It's probably not something to be mixing around with your charitable donations, though. All right, let's take our next question off the speak pipe. This one's from Catherine.
Hi, I have a question about the pros and cons of living off of loans versus living off of savings and investments. Basically, as I start medical school, I can either take out the maximum amount of loans, or I can use the $60,000 that I have saved in an investment account right now that's outside of an emergency fund, outside of retirement savings, to live off of for the next 4 years. I hate to use the money that I've invested because it's making great returns, but I also hate to max my loans and take that on. Not really sure what math would make more sense there. Thanks.
All right, let's get into the math of it to start with. The first question is, what are the scenarios in which you can come out ahead taking out loans? Okay. Scenario number one is that your investments earn more after tax than the loans cost you. So if you're taking out loans at 6%, which is pretty typical for med school loans, and you earn 10% and keep 7% after tax, then you've come out ahead. So that's one way that this can work out for you. Obviously, on a risk-adjusted basis, it's pretty hard to beat 6%. I mean, 6% guaranteed is a pretty attractive return, actually. Because if you look at the guaranteed investments out there, we're talking about 2% at best is what you're going to get on those, with the exception of I bonds, and that's probably temporary. But the other thing to keep in mind here about this is the other way that you can come out ahead, which is to have someone else pay off those loans. So you get the best of both worlds. You get to take out all this money, spend it on whatever you want, pay for your medical school, take out a little extra, go down to the bar with it, buy a season ski pass with it. And then, because they're federal student loans and you end up working for a 501c3 after you come out of training, you get them forgiven under public service loan forgiveness. That could also come out ahead. It doesn't feel very right to me necessarily to take out money you don't need to do that, but it's not illegal, and you could come out ahead doing that. Now, would I recommend that? No. Would I recommend you have money that's not in retirement accounts? I would use that for medical school. $60,000, whether you spread that out 15 a year or whatever, and that keeps you from taking out private loans, or whether you front load it and use it to pay for the first year so that you don't have to start taking out loans and that interest doesn't start piling up on you until your second year, that's probably what I would do. If I was starting med school and I had 60 grand, I would use it to pay for med school. You're investing in yourself. That's going to be a way better investment than anything you can invest in financially. Okay. So I would use your money to pay for med school. That's what I do. Now, whether you do it all at once or whether you spread it out over a few years to try to, improve the types of loans you get, that's what I would do. But is it possible you can come out ahead by this, what do we call this? We call this moral hazard is what the word is for it. And I'm not saying you're immoral. That's not what the word means. It's an economics term. When they're offering something like loan forgiveness, it causes people like you to make decisions differently, and that's called moral hazard. And the idea is that you take out loans that you wouldn't have otherwise taken out if PSLF didn't exist. So good luck with that decision, but those are the things to keep in mind as you make it. All right, let's take a question now about ETFs. This one comes from Tim, who I think all of you know pretty well.
Hi, Jim. This is Tim in Salt Lake City. Is it okay to buy ETFs with market orders? I know that you're supposed to buy when the spread is relatively small, so ideally in the middle of the trading day. But I've also heard that limit orders may protect you from things like flash crashes or large spreads. But honestly, putting in limit orders is kind of annoying, so I wanted to get your take on whether you think market orders are okay or whether limit orders are worth the extra effort. The second question, little mini question, is what do you think about buying ETFs by the dollar as opposed to by the share? Now many brokerages are offering partial or fractional ETF shares, and so it's nice to put in just a dollar amount and buy that amount. Is that okay, or somehow they're getting a hidden fee in there with those? Thanks. Bye-bye.
Tim, that's a great question. Let's do the first one first. Limit orders or market orders. When I first started trading ETFs is what it's technically called. I don't actually really trade them. I just kind of buy and hold them and occasionally tax loss harvest them and occasionally donate them to charity. But when you do that, everybody says, put in limit orders so that you don't get burned. And so I put in limit orders. And sometimes it'd execute right away, like when the price was falling. And when the price was going up, it wouldn't execute. And then I'd have to go back in and put another limit order and put another limit order in. And I'd do it 3 or 4 times and end up paying 25 cents more than when I first put the order in. And I was super annoyed about it. And so more recently, the last couple of years, I've just been putting them in market orders. Because here's the deal. If you look at the ETFs I'm buying, these are super liquid ETFs, high volume ETFs, things like the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, VTI, right? This might be one of the most widely traded ETFs out there. Or the small cap value ETF, VSF, or the Vanguard REIT ETF, VNQ, right? These are not like obscure little ETFs nobody's heard of. These are major ETFs, high volume ETFs. And if you put a market order in, the spread is like a penny or less. And it's going to execute right away. And so that's what I've been doing. I've just been putting in market orders and no big deal. I watch them, make sure they actually executed it. And pretty much that's what happened. What I see is what I get and no big deal. So I basically stopped using limit orders. I just use market orders for those ETF purchases, whether I'm doing it in my 401k at Fidelity, whether I'm doing it in my taxable account at Vanguard. I've been using market orders. So the second question is, should you do this cool feature, this fractional share feature? And I think it's super convenient because it eliminates one of the problems of using ETFs, right? One of the reasons I prefer traditional mutual funds over ETFs is that you can just put the dollars in. You don't have to calculate out the shares, aside from the fact that you can, put the order in and it just takes place at the end of the trading day. But you can do that, essentially the same thing with fractional shares. You can just pick the dollar amount. I want to put $5,000 into VTI, and you can just do that at Fidelity. You can't do it at Vanguard because they don't allow fractional share trading. But if your brokerage is a place that allows it, sure, why not? I think it's super convenient. It's no big deal to have fractional shares in there. So I wish all brokerages would do it. I suspect all will eventually. But I think it's actually probably a better system to allow that. So I wouldn't worry about it at all. I don't think there's an extra fee. You're not losing anything there, I don't think. If you are, it's pretty trivial, especially with these very liquid ETFs that most of us are using, which are basically, Vanguard index fund type ETFs. All right, next question is about the recent fiasco at Vanguard. You want a reason to hate Vanguard? This is a reason to hate Vanguard. Take a listen.
Hi, Jim. This is Chad from Georgia. Jason Zweig had an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal on January 22nd. He reported that Vanguard's target date retirement fund 2035 and 2040 distributed approximately 15% of their total assets as capital gains. This was felt to be related to a change in the minimum investment requirements for institutions, which prompted many institutions to get out of the standard fund and into an institutional equivalent. Jason's Y goes on to report how individual investors holding these retirement funds in taxable accounts got hit with large tax bills. One person with $3.6 million in the fund got a $150,000 tax bill. I'm curious what your take is on this situation and what lessons can be learned. I assume holding ETFs as opposed to mutual funds in taxable accounts could protect someone from an event like this. Thank you for all you do.
All right. So you want my take on it? You can go back and read a blog post I published on February 7th, 2022, called 4 Lessons from the Vanguard Target Retirement Long-Term Capital Gains Distribution Disaster. And that's what it was. Vanguard totally dropped the ball here. They did not stop to think about what the consequences of what they were doing was. Now, what they were doing is actually good for lots of people and lots of investors. They were lowering the expense ratio to be in these funds for a number of different institutional investors, right? Including, maybe your 401k, maybe some pension you're in. So it was a good thing they were trying to do, but they didn't think through the consequences. So what they did was they lowered the minimum investment to get into a particular share class of the target retirement funds. And so a bunch of people that could get into those basically sold the other share class and bought this share class. But in this particular case, they were technically different funds. So for these people, these 401ks and pension plans, it was no big deal because they're not taxable investors. They're inside a 401k. There's no tax consequences to realizing a capital gain. But what ends up happening when they leave is that it forces the fund that's now smaller to sell assets off. And that realizes capital gains. And those must be distributed to the remaining investors. This is a big problem in a lot of actively managed funds in that, the fund starts doing really well, people pile money in, and the fund starts not doing well, people pile out, and then the fund still got all these capital gains, so it has to sell all these appreciated shares, and the people who are still in the fund get hit with the taxes for that. So it's a big problem investing in actively managed funds in a taxable account, especially if the fund does really well and then does really poorly. Think about a fund like the ARC funds, right? They're technically ETFs, but if they're mutual funds, you could have this sort of an issue where you could end up paying capital gains on money that you never actually made any money on. It's one of the downsides of the mutual fund, wrapper, mutual fund type of investment. So, but in this case, the lessons to learn, there's basically 4 of them. Number 1, target retirement funds, life strategy funds, other funds of funds are not for taxable accounts. They're for retirement accounts. I've always told you only put them in retirement accounts. Everybody else who knows anything about investing tells you only put them in retirement accounts. I get it that people want to keep things simple, and this does help you keep things simple, but sometimes there's a price to be paid for simplicity. Like Einstein said, make things as simple as you can, but not more simple. And this is a case of making things more simple than you really can. So this is the price you pay if you tried to keep those funds in a taxable account. Lesson number 2 is that you can get massive capital gains distributions without actually having any capital gains. And that's important to understand with mutual funds. Okay. Number 3, funds without ETF share classes are vulnerable. Now, that's especially actively managed funds, as I mentioned, but even index funds that don't have ETF share classes have some vulnerability here, like a Fidelity index fund, for example. Beautiful thing about the Vanguard index funds is they've got that ETF share class. And so if you got to have this sort of a scenario happen, you can give the shares essentially to the ETF creators that can basically break down ETFs into their component parts, and they can take the capital gains. And so any fund that doesn't have an ETF share class has that vulnerability, and the target retirement funds do not have an ETF share class. So that makes them, in situations like this, much less tax efficient. And lastly, fund companies, even Vanguard, aren't always on your side. I don't know that anybody thought about this in advance, but the certain companies certainly had some competing priorities to weigh. It wanted to service institutional investors, and it wanted to service individual investors. It wanted to take care of those who invest inside retirement accounts and pensions and those who invest outside of them. But in this case, They either consciously or without a conscious decision decided it cared more about, it didn't care so much about those individual investors who had target retirement funds inside a taxable account. Now, my understanding is they've made some changes to ensure this won't happen again, but there's no guarantees. So, pretty lousy situation for anybody who's holding those funds in a taxable account. All right, let's take another question about Exponential Technologies.
Jim, this is David from California. This isn't so much a podcast question as it is a podcast subject suggestion. How about discussing Exponential Technologies and perhaps inviting Rick Edelman on for a question and answer session? He's a pretty much of an expert in the field and no longer is associated with the company that bears his name. Thanks a lot.
I don't pretend to be an expert on exponential technologies. What are we talking about with these? We're talking about things like virtual assistants, human augmentation or cyborgs, big data, biotechnology, blockchain, cybersecurity, lots of exponential technologies out there. And oftentimes when people want to talk about some sort of thing like this, they're talking about investing in the companies that are doing these sorts of things, and this kind of reminds me of the big rush to invest in ARK ETFs last year, right? Everyone's like, oh, all this stuff's going to change the world. You got to invest in it, put your money in it, and then of course, it became a bit of a bubble, and everybody rushes in, then everyone realizes maybe it's not all that and a bag of chips, and rushes back out. So I'm not going to pretend I know about all these exponential technologies, that I can explain them all in great detail, nor am I, saying you can't make money by investing preferentially into stocks that are associated with these technologies. What I am saying is that the market probably knows more than you do. And you may be better off just buying these sorts of companies at market weight using a low-cost, broadly diversified index fund, rather than trying to find a guru, whether that's Rick Edelman or somebody else, to tell you which ones are going to do particularly well, which of these dozens of exponential technologies are really going to take off and create a lot of value and end up being a great investment, and which ones aren't, because I truly have no idea. The good news is I own them all. They're publicly traded. I own them. All right, let's talk about active managed accounts. This is a question from Michael on the SpeakPipe.
Hi, I'm a big fan. I have a question regarding someone with established finances in his mid-50s who has been saving in tax-advantaged accounts for many years. I'm at the point where my advisor has strongly suggested that my net worth and funds, that is mostly ETFs and some individual stocks and mutual funds, in my brokerage accounts have gotten to a point where there are major advantages to a separately managed account, wherein paired stocks might follow an index. So it's passive in that way, but actively managed in the sales. The point is to recoup some tax loss harvesting and over years actually beat after taxes what I might be able to achieve in an S&P ETF or mutual fund. So if you can weigh in on the pros and cons of moving into that direction, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. You didn't give me a lot of specifics to work with here. So I'm going to go with my gut on this and tell you probably need a new advisor. This sounds to me like an advisor trying to justify their fee by introducing complexity into your life. Okay. I think the ability to have some extra tax loss harvesting is an absolutely stupid reason to invest in individual stocks. Okay. Here's the reason why, right? Especially if it's like, now you're big enough that you can do this. And I don't buy it. And here's why. Remember what tax loss harvesting is good for. Okay. You can use it to offset an unlimited amount of capital losses or capital gains rather. And you can deduct $3,000 of it against your ordinary income a year. Okay. So I am sitting on hundreds and thousands of dollars of tax losses that I've harvested over the years without ever having any individual stocks, using nothing but ETFs and mutual funds. I've got plenty of tax losses, and I've got 6 figures that I haven't even harvested that I may harvest later this week due to the latest correction. It is not very useful to me unless I have some huge capital gain event coming down the road. Now, I suppose it's possible that I could sell White Coat Investor for a large capital gain at some point down the road. And so I'm probably going to still continue to accumulate these tax losses. But if I just took the tax losses I have now and used them for $3,000 a year against my ordinary income, I've got enough to live to be 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 years old. Okay, no problem. I got plenty of tax losses. So the idea of accumulating more of them is not particularly appealing to me, not something I would pay a large fee for. For example, let's say this advisor wants to charge you 1% a year to do this, right? Say you have a $5 million portfolio. That's $50,000 a year. How is he possibly ever going to recoup that cost by providing enough value with tax loss harvesting? He's not. Especially when there's the risk of underperformance that comes from taking on the uncompensated risk that comes with individual stocks. So there are some things out there where people are basically trying to have you kind of build an index fund yourself that might make some sense at some very low fee. But most of the people trying to sell you actively managed accounts or active managed services end up providing you what my parents had when I first became financially literate and helped them look at their investments. And what was that? That was some schmuck underperforming the market while charging them 2% a year and churning the account like mad. Luckily, it was in a SEP IRA, so it wasn't in a taxable account causing them massive taxes, but it would have been if it was in a taxable account. Because he was pretending that he could, time the market, that he could pick stocks, and he couldn't. All I had to do was show him what his money would have done if I put it in a total stock market index fund. And all of a sudden, my parents didn't want to be with that advisor anymore. And I suspect you're in a similar situation. I don't have enough specifics. You didn't leave enough information. But those are my general thoughts on actively managed accounts. That it's very hard for there to be more value provided than the fee that is being charged on those, especially if the big claim is that they're going to make it back on tax loss harvesting. You can tax loss harvest with broadly diversified index funds and ETFs, no problem. I assure you, the market will go down from time to time and you'll be able to tax loss harvest. Hope that's helpful to you. I brought Andrew, my partner in crime from studentloanadvice.com, on the podcast to help us with our next couple of questions. Thanks, Andrew, for being with us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So our next question comes from Peter. Let's take a listen. This is about public service loan forgiveness.
Hi, Jim. It's Pete calling from Boston. I'm a urologist in academic practice and have a question about PSLF. I recently received a letter saying the Department of Education is now offering waivers for people who previously did not have an eligible loan, but who've worked for a qualifying employer and have made 120 on-time payments, that they now might be eligible for PSLF. The question I have for you is, have you heard about this? What do you know? And more specifically to my situation, I graduated from medical school in 2003, so I was frankly too old for the program, but I have made 120 qualifying payments and worked for a qualifying employer. What they're suggesting is you might be able to convert your loan into a direct consolidation loan and get credit for these back payments and be eligible for PSLF. So the question I have is, if I go through and change my loan to a direct consolidation loan, keeping in mind mine is going to be paid off in 20 years, but if I come up with a new loan that'll be paid off in 30 years and go into one of the income-based repayment programs, is this actually going to be beneficial? I know this is a long and confusing question, but frankly, I'm confused, and I'm wondering if you can shed some light on this. Thanks again for all your help. Appreciate everything you do.
Do we know about this, Andrew? Yes, we know about this. We've been
we
talking
know all
about this
about it.
for months. Yeah. So give him the answer. What's the scoop on this this new PSLF waiver that goes through Halloween?
Yeah, so and recently, so this came out on October 6th, 2021. This time-limited waiver came out, and what this has done is it's shaken up a lot of the world for public service loan forgiveness. And the reason why they've been able to do that is in the event of a national emergency or war, essentially the legislators can change up student loan law, albeit temporarily, which COVID has fit within that realm. And so essentially, the payments that you have made, any payment, as long as you have qualifying employment, should qualify. And you detailed one of the key steps is doing a direct federal consolidation, because the old rules, when you completed a consolidation, what it did is it erased all of your prior payment history. And we have run into this time and time again with so many clients that, like you, graduated med school in the 90s or early 2000s. And it just so happens that those loans that you got for med school were these family federal education loans. And these were not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So essentially, you got the short end of the stick just because you borrowed before 2007, 2010, when a lot of the newer loans, these direct federal student loans, were starting to get issued. So in short, yes, the next step would be to complete a direct federal consolidation. Once that goes through, then you're going to have, well, during that application, you'll have to pick a repayment plan. But I'm assuming you already made the 120 payments. You don't need to make any more payments. And then you'll need to certify your employment, use an employment certification form, and then a couple more months to go. And then you should be able to receive the immediate tax-free loan forgiveness.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's basically been expanded this year. So even people that didn't meet the requirements of the program when the program was introduced, it just got a whole lot more lenient. And that was actually President Biden, taking advantage kind of the COVID emergency to put some emergency rules in place. So take advantage if you can. All right, our next question is from email. It's actually a two-part question. The doc introduces it. I'm an academic physician, about 2.5 years out from training, definitely pursuing PSLF with about 100 qualified payments to date. It has two questions. The first one, in addition to funding retirement and a 6-month emergency fund, I've been saving a PSLF side fund in a high-yield savings account. My PSLF side fund will equal my med school debt burden, which is now $325,000, with over $120,000 in interest on top of $200,000 in principal, more or less coincident with the current projected end of the federal student loan holiday in May 2022. I anticipate that at that time, my attending level monthly payments will be large enough to finally cover the accruing interest and that my debt won't grow meaningfully in my final year and a half of qualified payments. What do you recommend I do with the side fund during that time? I know a high yield savings account is the most risk averse option. Do I just leave it there earning less than 1%? The rest of my personal investments are in low cost index funds. When would you start adding some of those PSLF side fund monies into index funds too? Why don't you give your take on this, Andrew, and then I'll give mine.
Yeah, congrats on your success so far. And, when now that you're out of training, you're making attending income, it is super important that you start paying yourself first. That means putting money into your 403B account, perhaps maxing that out. 457s, if you have that option as well, HSAs, backdoor Roths, you should definitely be contributing to those accounts. And then if you have additional money, on top of what you already have paid for your student loans, then, you can put it into a taxable account if you no longer need to be putting anything towards that public service loan forgiveness side fund. And then, whatever that looks like in terms of investments, low cost index funds, real estate, whatever that may be, moving forward to help build your net worth.
I think he's talking about the money in the side fund here, though, Andrew. At what point do you say, you know what, this is going to happen. I'm not going to leave it in high yield savings anymore, making 0.5%. I'm going to invest it. What do you think? Is it time to invest it? Is PSLF enough of a sure thing now that we can take on more risk with these PSLF side funds?
Yeah, I definitely think that what a lot of people are doing and what a lot of clients of mine are doing is that they're not just leaving it in high yield savings accounts. They're putting this in low cost index funds and they're like, okay, well, I've got 5 years of an investment horizon. Yes, there's going to be some fluctuation to the market. It's going to go up, it's going to go down, but over that long period of time. And this is just assuming that they don't give you the tax-free loan forgiveness and they don't completely change the rules, which if they did, that could completely kind of flip things upside down. But in essence, might just get started putting that into, whatever your preferred investment is. If it's a low cost index fund, whatnot, that you can really start kind of building that over time and, using that as kind of a down payment effectively if you were to leave academic medicine and move into private practice. But it sounds like you're just going to do this for a couple more years until you get your loans forgiven tax-free.
Yeah, I've been talking about a PSLF side fund for a long time, years and years and years and years. Let me see what the date is on the first time I ran this post here on the PSLF side fund. This idea that you save money up on the side. Let's see. It looks like I ran it first in maybe it was only 2018. I thought it was a while back. But at any rate, the point of a PSLF side fund was to protect you from two things. One was something happening to the program, right? The legislative risk, the congressional changes, whatever, right? Because at that point, people were going, this program's been in place 10 years and I haven't heard of anybody that's gotten PSLF. Maybe something's going to happen to it. I know it's in the promissory note, but there's a certain amount of risk there. The second reason you had it was just in case your life changed and you decided you don't want to work for a 501c3 anymore, or you didn't want to be full-time anymore, or something happened and you just wanted the freedom to go do something else. So that's why I told people, hey, save up this PSLF side fund, then you're not behind your peers who've been, living like a resident and paying off their loans like crazy within a couple of years. That was the idea behind a PSLF side fund. Well, I think the last few years have shown us that this is a real thing. People are getting public service loan forgiveness. Tens of thousands of people a year are getting public service loan forgiveness. I think the legislative risk for anybody that's, a year out of receiving this is essentially gone. Okay. So if you think the risk of you leaving this job is also essentially gone, I'm not sure you need a PSLF side fund anymore. I think it's probably time to move that into your regular investments, whatever that might be, whether that is, paying down a mortgage, whether that is putting it toward 529s for your kids, whether that is investing it for retirement, whether that is starting investing for retirement in a mutual fund portfolio, whether that is starting a real estate empire, whatever you would do with this money if you receive PSLF. I think it's probably time to go ahead and do that. You're basically at the end of this process. Everybody's getting PSLF that knows the rules and is qualifying for them. I think it's probably time to maybe even phase out the idea of a PSLF side fund, except to protect you from your own career changes. You think it's too early to say that, Andrew? You think they still need to keep it in relatively safe stuff, at least some of it?
I think at this stage in the game, they're close enough there, and if they're just going to stick around in that position for 2 more years, with the increase of people that are actually receiving public service loan forgiveness. I mean, a couple of years ago it was like 3 or 4%, but over the last couple of months we've seen that success rate move up to somewhere in the teens, and I'm assuming that number will continue to go up. That it's a pretty surefire thing now that they're going to get there and receive that loan forgiveness. So I definitely think they can start, shifting their mindset towards some of their other financial goals, like you had stated earlier, saving for different things other than just putting money aside for this side fund.
Yeah, for sure. It's been interesting to watch the last few years as it becomes a trickle to more of an avalanche. Even those numbers you're throwing out there, though, where it was 1% of the people that applied, those aren't really honest numbers, right? Those aren't people who actually qualified to get PSLF. Most of them didn't qualify. And I think the denominator they're using is everybody filing an annual certification form. So 16% of those filing an annual certification form is not too bad, given that most of those people don't have their 120 payments yet.
Yeah, and it was, the first 4 years, nobody could receive loan forgiveness in the public service loan forgiveness program until October 2017, right? Because the program was enacted in October 2007. So you had all these people applying back then in the early days, and they were factored into the overall success rate number. And obviously, nobody could receive it until that point in time. So that was definitely, diluting that number way far below what it is. But over the last 5-6 months, because of this waiver, there's been about 70 or 80,000 people that have now gotten public service loan forgiveness. So it really gets the number up to about 90,000, because the first 4 years, there was only about 10, 12, 15,000 or so borrowers that had gotten it. But over the last 6 months or so, that number has gone way up. So we'll definitely start to see that this is much more of a surefire thing. And that, if you qualify, definitely throw your hat in the ring and give it a shot.
Yeah, for sure. All right. The second part of his question was, initially when graduating from medical school, I was given bad advice conflating consolidation with refinancing. Therefore, didn't consolidate my federal debt for fear of eliminating PSLF eligibility. My PSLF qualified payment counts are identical on all of my 20 or 30 individual direct loans, and all of them are PSLF eligible. Is there any benefit for me in consolidating now under the waiver? Would it raise my credit score, for example, to have a smaller number of loans, even though the balance is the same? I'm eyeing buying my first home in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, short answer, no. Doing a direct federal consolidation, it's not going to benefit you at this point. And like you stated, the number of your payment count, and this is a huge concern for so many out there. You have one loan that has 100 and then you got one that has 80. If that was the situation, then okay, perhaps you could look into consolidation. But at this point in time where the counts are the same, you're 8.5 or so years in, you're only 2 years out, why would you make things more complicated at this situation? Because, I mean, as you can see, is that, if you come, I mean, the loan servicers, as is right now, will overcomplicate things. So don't throw another thing in there to make this more complicated. Yes, it would take your 20 to 30 loans and make it 2 loans. So from an administrative perspective, might be a tad easier, but I wouldn't touch it at this point. Continue to make your 2 years of payments, do those application certification forms, and then just completely wipe your hands of this, and you'll be so happy when you reach that point.
Yeah, don't rock the boat at this point. He says he's buying the home in the next 2 to 3 years, and you're going to have this paid off in a year and a half via PSLF. This is going to be perfect. Your credit score is going to take a bump, and you're going to be perfectly situated to get a mortgage. All right. So what are people talking about when they're coming in and meeting with you at studentloanadvice.com? What are the questions and concerns people have this year?
Yeah, there obviously with the timing of everything that's been on hold for 2 years, I think that's always on people's mind is what's going to happen with payments? Are they going to get pushed back again? What about income recertification? What should I do about taxes? So I think kind of starting into income recertification, and this is a really big topic because the rules are that every single year you need to recertify your income. And if you don't, they're going to send you this scary email that the interest is going to capitalize. They're going to put your loan into forbearance maybe for a month, or, you're no longer going to qualify for that payment cap. They're going to put you in the standard 10-year payment plan, whatever. So they're going to throw out a bunch of those different scare tactics. But just so you can go to studentaid.gov or your loan servicer's website, and it should show you the next time that you need to recertify your income. And if it is prior to November of 2022, just move it back 1 year. So that means if you log into studentaid.gov and it says that May 2022, you need to recertify your income, it's not going to be until May 2023. So that has a huge impact and has been a huge benefit for so many of you out there. I'm meeting with clients that haven't recertified their income since 2018, 2019, and now they're a high paid, surgeon, and they're still making payments on their resident or even their intern income. They're only paying 50 to $100 a month on their student loans. So obviously keep those payments as low as you can for now, if you're assuming that you're doing one of the like public service loan forgiveness. And then I think kind of the second point on that is if your income's gone down over the last, since 2018 or 19, go ahead and recertify, right? You can get a lower monthly payment. But if you don't do anything, just assume that the payments that are going to start up here again in May are going to be based on your income pre-pandemic.
Yeah. Well, interest rates are rising these days. How's that impacting borrowers?
Yeah, it's super easy with those of you that have private student loans. If you can get a lower rate, go ahead and lock that in before the Fed raises rates in March. So as of recording right now here, and they're anticipating that economists are saying that they're going to raise rates a couple more times this year. So for those that have private student loans, very, very easy right now. If you can get a lower interest rate, and that usually happens when you graduated training, you graduated med school, you got married to another high earner, your credit situation has improved, go ahead, refinance those loans. But for those of you with federal student loans that have been sitting on the sideline for 2 years now and refinancing, gets a little bit tougher. Do I want to take advantage of 0% interest for the next 2 months, or do I want to lock in a low rate right now? And, I think what we're saying right now is that if you're going to refinance your federal student loans, go ahead, get some quotes. It's a really easy process to get preliminary quotes on the different private lenders that we work with very often. And they're going to, it takes 5 minutes, and they're going to give you, essentially what they would offer you with quotes, because you don't want to be paying that 6, 7, 8% on your federal student loans any longer come May. So if you're looking to refinance your federal student loans, then look to do that, coming up here in April, because once you get the preliminary quote, they give you 30 days to pull the trigger on that. So then you can also kind of keep in mind if the Fed ends up pushing back federal student loan interest again. But I'd encourage you, make sure that's kind of high priority, as it's a dual-edged sword, because rates are starting to go up and you don't want to be stuck paying a higher rate than you should.
Yeah. So you can get those links that we have from the White Coat Investor to those student loan refinancing companies. You can find those at whitecoatinvestor.com/student-loan-refinancing. If you go through those links, not only do you get the best rates you can possibly get, you get cash back, and you get access to our online course, Fire Your Financial Advisor, absolutely free, an $800 value. And so that's definitely the best place to go to shop around when you're looking to refinance. But as you approach May 1st, that's probably the time to be doing it. The couple good things about it: number one, you'll be ready to pull the trigger just as interest starts accumulating again. Number two, if they do extend it again, then you haven't yet pulled the trigger and you can still back off. And so I think April is going to be a big month for people running the numbers on their student loans for sure. And let's see, we're recording this March 8th, but by the time you're hearing this, it's already April. So it's time to go to whitecoatinvestor.com/student-loan-refinancing if you are looking to refinance loans and see what you are eligible for. All right. What else is going on in the student loan world here, Andrew? I understand you've been seeing a lot of questions about taxes and student loan repayment.
Yeah, and it just comes with the time of year, right? We're coming up on tax season when this goes live. It's going to be right before tax day. People are, just because the way that you file your taxes can have a massive impact on the repayment plan that you're in, and there's a lot of nuances to that. Whether you're single, are you married? What state do you live in? And does your spouse have debt? Do they have income? Those are all, important factors that can play into, the way you file your taxes and repayment plan. And, a really common example I see is, a dual physician couple, both earning good money, and, they're making, let's say, $30,000 a month. And for simplicity, they're both making $15K a month, after tax, all the contributions that they make, and monthly payments in, like pay as you earn, that would be about $3,000 a month. If they were just doing regular old married filing jointly, because the pay as you earn plan takes about 10% of your monthly income. And, but what if they were to do their taxes married filing separately? What that can do is it could cut their payment in half. If each, because then the payment's only based off of the borrower's income, not their spouse's income. So if they were both making $15,000 a month, instead of the payment being $3,000, it could be $1,500 a month, which over the course of a year, that's about $20,000 less of student loan payments. And let's just assume they had 5 more years until they reached loan forgiveness. In aggregate, that could be about $100,000 less money that they end up paying towards their student loans, which is that's a massive figure. And oftentimes, that's a really big point, is that every single dollar that you pay towards your loans when you're doing a loan forgiveness track is a dollar that you can't get back. So if there's a way to minimize those payments, this can be quite beneficial to maximize the upside for PSLF. However, when you do that, you do end up having to pay more in taxes, or it ends up changing the tax liability. So that's where you need to have a good CPA or an accountant on your side. I know White Coat has some excellent resources there, but just so you know, these CPAs and tax advisors, they don't quite understand the intersectionality and how student loan repayment and taxes intersect. And that's what we do every single day at studentloanadvice.com is help people out to figure out which repayment plan would fit best with their financial goals to get their loans done as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's even more complicated than that, because you got to think about what kind of retirement plan you're using. Whether you're making Roth contributions or traditional contributions, and all that has effects on how much you're paying on your student loans. So if you're in any sort of a complicated student loan situation, you're married to another high earner, maybe both of you have student loans, maybe one or both of you is going for PSLF, it's well worth a few $100s to book a consult with studentloanadvice.com and get some specific information about your situation. So if you need to do that, you can book that at studentloanadvice.com. Thanks, Andrew, for coming on and helping us with these questions.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We've covered PSLF in great detail. We've covered ETFs. We've covered FSAs. This episode was brought to you by Laurel Road for Doctors. Laurel Road is committed to serving the financial needs of doctors. You take care of us, it's time someone took care of you. White coat investors can receive a cash bonus when they refinance their student loans with Laurel Road. Their easy-to-use online application process allows you to see personalized rate options in only a few minutes. Plus, they don't charge any application or origination fees or prepayment penalties. For terms and conditions, visit www.laurelroad.com/WCI. That's www.laurelroad.com/WCI. Laurel Road is a brand of KeyBank N.A. member FDIC. All credit products are subject to credit approval. Don't forget, Peter Kim's Passive Real Estate Academy is going on sale. It's open for enrollment. That's whitecoatinvestor.com/PREA. Also, don't forget to nominate your favorite financial educators for the White Coat Investor Financial Educator Award. That's whitecoatinvestor.com/educator. Thanks for those of you leaving us 5-star reviews and telling your friends about the podcast. Our latest 5-star review said, "Jump-started my financial education. I love the addition of Dr. Spath. Great perspective and voice to pair with Dr. Dolly. Love the show. Only wish I'd found it sooner. Great primer to stimulate learning about finances for a doc, especially for someone who isn't quite ready to dive into reading a few financial books." Keep your head up, shoulders back. You've got this and we can help. We'll see you next time on the White Coat Investor Podcast.
The hosts of the White Coat Investor Podcast are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is free entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.